Welcome to Timeless Wisdom Podcast. Today we're diving into a really thought-provoking passage from the revealed word. We're looking specifically at chapter 2, verses 89 and 90, and also bringing in some, related verses that shed more light.
Absolutely. And the core question we want to get into is, well, it's about why some people who were genuinely anticipating truth ended up rejecting it.
Exactly. It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? And more importantly, what timeless wisdom can we take from this for our own lives, our own growth?
We'll touch on the history, of course, but really connect it back to those inner struggles, those choices we all face.
So the sources are key here, primarily the Holy Quran.
That's right. Chapter 2, verses 89 and 90 are central, but we'll also look at chapter 5, verse 48, and chapter 27, verse 76 for a fuller picture.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Before the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, arrived, what was the situation in Medina?
Well, the Jewish tribes there, they had their scriptures, the Torah, and they weren't just passive holders of this knowledge. They were actively expecting a new prophet.
Right, it wasn't some vague hope. Their own texts pointed towards this.
Precisely. And it was common knowledge they were anticipating this messenger.
And here's a really interesting part. They actually used to talk about it with the Arab tribes in Medina, the Al-Farusin and Khazraj.
They did. They'd mentioned this coming prophet, this divine book that was on its way. It wasn't a secret.
So they were openly declaring, we believe in this future prophet, this book.
Yes, and even more, they apparently expressed readiness to, sacrifice for this new cause, to stand with this prophet against those they saw as disbelievers at the time.
Wow, so a really strong stated conviction beforehand, you can feel the anticipation.
Definitely, it taints a picture of real eagerness.
Okay, then the moment arrives, guidance comes.
The Quran is revealed to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
And it wasn't like something completely disconnected from what they knew.
Not at all. The Quran explicitly states it came confirming the previous scriptures, including the Torah they held. It was presented as a continuation, a clarification, a completion.
And Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse 48, really emphasizes this, doesn't it? Sent with truth, confirming what came before, and acting as a standard.
Exactly. And it also mentions something important, that different communities receive different laws, different paths, as a test from God.
A test? How so?
Well, the verse suggests the goal was to encourage striving towards goodness, competing in good deeds, with the understanding that God would ultimately clarify all differences when everyone returns to Him.
Okay, so it acknowledges diversity within a continuous divine message.
Precisely. And then Surah An-Naml, chapter 27, verse 76, adds another layer. It says the Quran explains much of what the children of Israel themselves disagreed about.
So it wasn't just confirming, it was also meant to resolve their own internal disputes.
That's what the verse indicates, a source of clarity for their own points of contention.
Right, so you've got anticipation, confirmation, clarification. You'd think the reaction would be acceptance.
It's right. Logically, yes, but that's not what happened. Our sources are clear. Despite everything, the Jewish tribes in Medina largely chose disbelief.
It's quite a turn. Rejection.
And not just passive rejection, they actually ended up siding with those who actively opposed Islam, a complete reversal from their earlier statements.
And this rejection had a ripple effect, didn't it?
A huge one. Because the Asafis and Khazraj tribes, remember, the ones who had heard about the coming prophet from the Jewish tribes, they encountered Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in Mecca.
And because they'd heard about him and perhaps saw the rejection by those who should have known better.
It seems to have clicked for them. They readily recognized him as the promised messenger. It's quite ironic, actually.
The ones who spread the news ended up rejecting him, while the ones who heard the news accepted him.
Allah's plan works in mysterious ways. Their rejection inadvertently opened the door for others.
Yeah, and the reception from the Awqas and Khazraj was so different from what the prophet faced elsewhere, like in Taif or even parts of Mecca.
Absolutely. They welcomed him, pledged their support, and eventually invited him to Medina, which became the turning point for the Muslim community.
And a big part of that acceptance seems linked back to the knowledge initially shared by those who then turned away.
It really underscores that knowing something isn't the same as accepting it. Information alone isn't enough.
Which brings us back to that core question. Why? Why reject something you were seemingly waiting for?
Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 90, gives us a direct and quite stark answer.
What does it say?
It points to outrage, resentment, basically envy. Resentment that Allah chose to bestow His favor prophethood, the Quran, on whomever He willed from His servants.
So it wasn't necessarily about the message's content, but who received it. Maybe they expected it to be someone from their own lineage.
That seems to be the implication. Pride and envy clouded their judgment. Reality didn't match their expectations, or perhaps their perceived entitlement.
The verse uses strong language, calling it an evil thing they have sold themselves for. What does that mean, sold themselves?
It frames it like a transaction, a really bad bargain. They traded away the chance for divine guidance, for eternal reward.
Right.
For what? For worldly status, maybe. For pride. For temporary considerations.
Selling their potential for something fleeting and ultimately harmful.
Exactly. It's a powerful metaphor. It makes you think. What do we sometimes sell ourselves for? What temporary gains or comforts do we prioritize over what we know is truly better for us, spiritually or ethically?
That hits home, doesn't it? We all face those moments, knowing the right path, but being tempted by something easier or something that strokes our ego.
And the verse warns about the consequence, bringing anger upon themselves and a humiliating punishment. It highlights the seriousness of knowingly rejecting truth.
So let's distill the lessons for us today. For personal growth, what stands out?
Well, first and foremost, the absolute necessity of sincerity and acting on knowledge. The Israelites had the knowledge they anticipated, but biases, envy, worldly desires, they got in the way.
That gap between knowing and doing. Psychology talks about this a lot too, right? The knowledge-action gap.
Absolutely. Intellectually understanding something is one thing. Integrating it into your behavior, overcoming internal resistance, that's the real challenge.
We can probably all relate. Times we knew better, but ego or maybe fear of change held us back.
This story is a potent reminder of that internal battle.
And that idea of selling ourselves short, that's crucial for self-reflection, isn't it?
Definitely. What are my priorities? Am I trading long-term spiritual well-being for some short-term gratification or worldly status? It forces an honest look at our motivations.
The contrast with the Os and Khazraj is also telling.
Yes. Their openness, their willingness to accept truth, seemingly without the baggage of expectation or tribal pride that hindered the others.
It speaks to the importance of humility and open heart, being receptive to truth regardless of where it comes from. Again, something modern psychology would call open-mindedness or cognitive flexibility.
It really boils down to humility, yes. Setting aside the ego to see clearly. Perhaps their lack of prior claims to prophethood allowed the Amos and Khazraj to approach the message with more sincerity.
So the big picture here seems to be that recognizing truth is just the first step. Accepting it, internalizing it. That requires more. It requires humility, overcoming envy, aligning our desires with what Allah wants.
Precisely. It's not just an intellectual exercise. It's a matter of the heart and will. And this historical account is such a powerful warning against letting ego and attachments blind us.
So for everyone listening, maybe reflect on this. Are there areas in your own life where you have the knowledge, perhaps from Islamic teachings, about what's right, what's beneficial,
but you struggle to consistently put it into practice? Are there internal roadblocks? Maybe pride, attachment, fear? Identifying those is the first step.
The Quran's wisdom here, shown through this story, gives us tools. Introspection, turning to Allah for help, striving for sincerity. These can help overcome those challenges.
It's about that constant effort, that jihad against the nafs, the self.
For more insights like this and practical steps for growth rooted in our faith, do check out our channel, The Broke Entrepreneur.
The Quran's wisdom is timeless. Apply it today.